Guilty Gear has this character called Chip Zanoff. His gameplay is designed to overwhelm opponents with his devastating speed and mix-up capabilities, but every once in a while he has a round that goes like this.
I feel like that axe kick is another thing that we're going to see more of, right? Because if he jumps back, he does avoid the fall.
And that's what did we talk about, Steve? Those bad bursts in long set situations. Look at the return on this. This is just for you panicking. This is punish. This is pain.
Give him a hand. Oh,
Clap
wow.
him up.
He ain't even done yet. Oh,
my man.
That's kind of the thing with Chip and other characters like him. When I'm playing really well, the character feels unbeatable, like there's nothing I can't beat as long as I pilot my character properly. Though on the contrary, at my lowest points, Chip feels as if he's worse than he actually is. Rounds like this. Okay, well, it's gonna happen.
Oh, next round.
Best. I am not besting this. Whoa! Seems to happen more often, and I question whether the character is worth the effort. I wish that I could play at my best at all times, to always experience that feeling of being unstoppable when I play Chip, but I can't consistently play at my best, because nobody can. A person's actual best is a rare occurrence, like flow state. Many see flow state, or being in the zone, as where you perform to the best of your abilities. Peak performance, if you will. It's an almost surreal experience, often described as feeling like everything else in the world disappears, like time stands still and that you have full control over everything. Yeah, that sounds exaggerated, but that's literally how this elite surfer described his experience of it, and how many others do as well. So, what even is flow state anyway? Popularized by this guy, flow state is a mental state in which a person becomes fully immersed in an activity. I'm not a psychologist though, so I'll give you two quotes from the man himself. There's this focus that, once it becomes intense, leads to a sense of ecstasy, a sense of clarity. You know exactly what you want to do from one moment to the other. You get immediate feedback. The ego falls away. Time flies. Every action, movement, and thought follows inevitably from the previous one, like playing jazz. Your whole being is involved, and you're using your skills to the utmost. The competitive nature of fighting games, and esports in general, make them a fantastic environment for entering flow state, although it can really occur in a multitude of situations. Playing music, writing, playing chess, people can reach flow state during these activities and more. And descriptions of flow vary, but many of them sound surreal. Just look at how this athlete described their experience. I feel as if I am very involved in the event, but my involvement is without a huge input on my part. It's almost as if I'm floating from one place to another, purely through instinct more than anything else. Some hockey player said this. Now, have I ever experienced flow state? I am not sure, but I feel as though I've gotten closest to it when I'm playing a fighting game. When playing Chip in Plus R to be specific. It's only been during a set against a rival of mine that I'm pretty evenly matched with, but even then, the occurrence of anything near flow state has been rare. When I have had these feelings, it's been a supreme and extremely memorable feeling. My friend and arch nemesis Hiari, who denied me of 2 first places at the same tournament, also described his experience of flow state for me. It feels like everything but the game, me, and the person I'm playing are the only thing that exists. Thoughts feel clearer and I can process decisions a lot faster. Reaction time also feels enhanced. Then, slowly I can hear sound of the surroundings again when the set is done. In addition, he only felt it in the middle of tourney sets, and only in high-stakes sets. Despite my unending hatred towards this man for denying me of 2 trophies in the same night, you should follow this guy on Twitch for some good fighting gaming. There is a good chance that some of you watching this have experienced flow state or something close to it as well. Contrary to what Kuroko no Basket would have you believe, flow state or the zone is not something that only the few elites of a field are able to experience. This model of flow, created by the definer of flow state himself, kind of makes it look like you need to be at the highest skill level to experience flow. That's not the case. You don't need to be the best, but you do at least need to be operating at a level where you're confident in your abilities. Fighting games are no exception. Among the generally agreed upon conditions for entering flow, one of the conditions is that there needs to be a good balance of high perceived challenge and high perceived skill. You don't actually need to be Daigo. You could just be that person who wins a bit of money at locals. As long as you truly believe yourself to be skilled, and see your opponent as a tough but beatable challenge, it's possible to get into that state of flow. That's still not a guarantee it'll happen though, it's just one of the conditions. And although I've only ever experienced this feeling or close to it with Pixie characters, I'm sure you can experience this with pretty much any archetype in fighting games anyway. Hold on. What is a Pixie character? A slightly less common archetype in fighting games, according to the spectacular fighting game glossary made by Infill, a Pixie character is a character that has extreme movement and mix-up options, but pretty low damage output and low health. If you liken a character to a fly buzzing around your head that you can't seem to swat, chances are they are a Pixie character. They're similar to glass cannons, but their movement options are even more exaggerated at the cost of doing very little damage. Examples include Chip in Guilty Gear, 12 from Street Fighter Third Strike, and Sonic from Super Smash Bros. They are those exceptionally quick characters that constantly buzz around you, hitting you with sting after sting, but never stay there long enough to get smacked in the face. If you want a taste of death by 1,000 paper cuts, fight a Pixie character. At the same time, Pixie characters are usually only able to withstand less hits on average before they're face to face with heaven, or more appropriately hell. In addition to the examples provided by the glossary, I'm going to provide a few more examples, just so we have an even better idea of what a Pixie character looks like. We have Strider Hiryu from Marvel vs. Capcom, Seth from Under Night In-Birth, Sheik from Super Smash Bros., Yosuke Hanamura from Persona 4 Arena, Taokaka from Blaze Blue, and Vermilion Akiha from Melty Blood. Some of these characters break the rules in some regards, but overall, they fit into the same archetype. At the moment, Pixie characters are a favourite archetype of mine. If you asked me why Pixie characters are my favourite, I would say it's because of their speed. Sure, that seems obvious, but it doesn't properly communicate why I enjoy the archetype so much. It's not actually just because they're so fast, it's because of what that speed gives them. Through their uncontested speed, Pixie characters will be wherever they want to be, whenever they want to be, and you'll have a hard time preventing that. But, let's be honest, on paper, this is one of the most unrestrained archetypes in fighting games. Their most prominent strengths are actual character tools, like high speed and good mix-up, while all of their flaws are number-related, like low damage and low health. Character tools and numerical stats both matter, of course, but I'm trying to say that their flaws are mostly highlighted in the face of human error, aka when you make a mistake and now you're the one getting hit. Otherwise, Pixie characters are faster than everyone else, and with that speed, you play on their terms. They control the pace of the match, and you have to respect that fact, or else you just die. It's no wonder people don't like fighting them. Sure, they don't get as much hate as your local Zoner, but the archetype isn't as blatantly annoying as a Zoner can be. I said in my video about Zoners that one of the reasons they're as frustrating as they are is because they require such a drastic change in playstyle regardless of the level of your play. I think a similar rule applies to Pixie characters, but they get away with some of the hate because this drastic change in playstyle isn't required at lower levels of play. At lower levels, it's easy for someone to understand how to play a Zoner correctly enough. Get distance, throw projectile, or use long button, whatever. It takes more work to play them well, but how to properly play and win with a Zoner's strengths comes to you intuitively. I'm not sure I could say the same for a Pixie character. You can understand that they're fast, but what will you do with that speed? It's a traditional fighter, not a Naruto game. How do you take advantage of that speed? You'll need a decent understanding of how neutral operates in the game that you're playing, something that you're not going to have at a lower level. Instead, what you'll get is a Pixie character played like your everyday rushdown character, just slightly faster at it. But that's not how you take advantage of this archetype's strength. It's only when you start reaching the mid and higher levels that someone will be playing a Pixie character in a way that takes proper advantage of their strengths. Their high speed changes the neutral game by making the reactable become unreactable. For example, running straight at the opponent is an approach that will often get you slapped if you did this with most characters. It's not that hard to react to. But with pixies, this works much, and I mean much more often, because by the time anyone has reacted to the fact that a pixie character is running at them, the pixie character is already in their face. People try to counter this problem by throwing out a button in hopes that it will catch the pixie character during their approach, though unfortunately for them, the pixie character's speed also makes for an excellent whiff punish tool. Hence, in people's attempts to swat the pixie character on their way in, a wrongly placed button that whiffs is yet another opening for the pixie character to get right in your face. Thus, pixie characters begin to feel like they're always on top of you, yet always too far away to reach all the time. That's when pixie characters get hate, and I don't blame people. Not only do you have to make a rather annoying change in playstyle, a lot of people don't even know that this archetype requires a radically different approach. Granted, it's not easy to grasp that in the same way one might grasp that they're playing an entirely different game when they're fighting a zoner. If you're up against a pixie character piloted by a good player, you don't get to play the game in the same way. Approaching the matchup like you would for many other characters will likely lead to loss and frustration. If I'm playing Persona, I will play Sho in a similar way for most matchups. Get close to mid-range and harass them with my big sword normals. That will work against the majority of the cast. Yosuke though, this pixie asshole, I learnt my lesson the hard way. There's no get close to mid-range. You don't get to chase him, you can't catch him. No, instead, you preemptively threaten space and bait your opponent to approach in a way that will get them killed. You don't sit still and throw out buttons, but you definitely don't play as if you have a shot in hell at catching them with a direct approach. Pixie characters may be ridiculously fast, but they typically do need to at least be in your face to get any damage done. They'll attempt to make an approach eventually, it's just up to you to sniff out how they intend to go about it and punish them accordingly. But, as an important reminder, none of this is easy. I mean, this is still fighting games, none of this is ever easy. It takes time, and if you're someone that struggles to deal with these characters, yeah, a bunch of other people do too. They're not broken, but they are tough. And if you don't like fighting them, that makes total sense. Some people do, some people don't. They're my favorite archetype to use, but I'd be lying if I said I actually enjoyed fighting pixie characters when other people play them. On that account, despite everything I've said thus far, I still haven't explained why pixie characters are solidified as my favorite archetype in all of fighting games. It is time we get back to the topic of flow state. Sort of. Long ago in this video, I said that the best experiences I've had when playing fighting games has come from piloting a pixie character when I am in or near flow state. This remains consistently true, so much so that the pixie archetype has become my go-to archetype when I find a new game. However, these experiences don't occur frequently. When I start a set with someone like Chip, I'm technically playing my favorite archetype, but in truth, I only truly feel like I'm playing my favorite archetype once I'm about 60 minutes into the set. The key difference between the beginning of a set and the set 60 minutes later for me is how focused I am. The first 60 minutes are merely a warm-up. It's after that first hour that I often manage to tap into a deeper focus. This only happens when I'm in a set with someone on a similar skill level. If my opponent is of a way higher skill level, my motivation will almost inevitably die out if I see no success after a long while, and I eventually become apathetic towards the set. If my opponent is of a way lower skill level, I struggle to reach a deeper focus because it isn't really necessary to be able to win. It's only the sets where either of us could win that, after a while, it seems as though instead of getting exhausted, my focus only goes deeper and I'm performing in a way that feels a step above how I was at the beginning of the set. I couldn't tell you why, but I'm not the only one that feels this way. This lines up with how this guy visualized different states of play in his model on flow state. When the challenge is high and your abilities are mid to high, that's when you're able to deeply focus, and that's where pixie characters really shine for me. This is where the treasure in the archetype can be discovered, in a state of flow. And honestly, I'm extending that to arousal state as well. Though, why are they so great in these states of play? Who's to say that other archetypes don't feel amazing when you're in flow or arousal state? I speak from experience first when I say that pixie characters are more fun than any other archetype when you're focused, but hopefully in me explaining the traits of this archetype and why I think they're perfect for flow state, you'll understand where I'm coming from. Think back to what I said about pixie characters. Pixie characters are faster than everyone else, and with that speed, you play on their terms. They control the pace of the match, and you have to respect that fact or else you'll die. See, when Obama said,
"This character can move, bruh. This character, the screen is his playground. He can go anywhere, do anything, but
he was incredibly on point. I couldn't describe it better. Like how a child's imagination is free to run wild on the playground, the player of a pixie character is free to do whatever their brain can imagine. Where other characters must consider the limitations of their archetype during a match, for example, the grappler's typically slow speed locking them out of options, pixie characters almost always have an option.
Chip, he has every tool in the book.
Now, pair this with a deep focus. When you're in that state of play, be it arousal state or flow state, your brain is coming up with ideas that you couldn't fathom until you achieved that deeper focus. If there is a problem, it'll search for a solution, and the last thing, the absolute last thing you want, is for you to have no options to overcome that problem. The archetype that doesn't have as many dead ends is the pixie archetype. There's almost always something you can do, and piloting a character that can actualize almost every idea you form while you're focused is an amazing feeling. As a simplified example, the 3 overall ranges in a fighting game are long range, mid range, and close range. Playing a pixie character, I can choose to play at whichever of these ranges I prefer during a match for any of the several reasons that I could come up with, and no character can deny me of that. Meanwhile, my opponents don't get a say in any of that. Even if their speed isn't bad, I'm just faster. I will zone you if I want, I will rush you down if I want, I'll play a mid-range with punish game if I want. This is phenomenal. The feeling is phenomenal. Your character keeping up with your brain, actualizing each and every mini-goal you're trying to accomplish in a match. Nobody else can do it like they do, which is why they're the perfect archetype for flow state and why I love this archetype so much. Whether it's in flow state or near it with arousal state, playing a pixie character with that level of focus makes you fall in love with fighting games all over again. As a result, despite not even playing with that level of focus half the time, I stick with this archetype because I know what it's capable of, and I can't help but continue to chase that feeling. A fleeting feeling, because ultimately, that razor-sharp focus will always eventually disappear. If we were able to play in flow state at all times, pixie characters would be far too strong in fighting games. But we can't. This is the reality that this archetype rests on. And similarly, it rests on the fact that most of us cannot play at the peak of human potential anyway. Finally, to reiterate what I said once before, pixie characters are supposed to be stronger than the rest of the cast with little in the way as a limiter. If anything, their most common limiter is short range, which isn't much of a flaw for a lot of these characters, if at all. The real flaw for the archetype is low damage output and low health, a flaw highlighted in the face of human error. Either that or they just simply get outplayed. But if an archetype's strength is balanced by their flaws, and the flaw for pixie characters is heavily reliant on something as variable and fickle as the potential a human can play at, no wonder this archetype is so polarizing. Most people aren't going to be playing at a human's peak potential with a pixie character, and so pixie characters must be balanced in a way that makes them satisfying to play for most players, yet also not too overbearing in the hands of the few that show off the strength of the character when played at the top of human potential. How do you balance that? I don't know, but it doesn't sound easy. This may be reflected in the fact that this archetype has historically looked like a nightmare to try and balance. They often claim spots at either the top or the bottom of the tier list, rarely in between. I couldn't tell you with confidence about the intricacies behind the tier placement of every pixie I'm about to mention, but I can say that they often broke the rules of the archetype. Strictly looking at high level play, Taokaka dominated in BlazBlue when she had good damage output, then dropped down to bottom tier in another version when her damage was nerfed. Seth was bottom tier. Seth was low tier in 1 Under Night In-Birth where he had low damage and low health, but after a health and damage buff, as well as buffed normals and Oki, he shot up to top tier in the next. Vermilion Archetype is the top tier and she does far more damage than you'd expect from the archetype. Chip has also been all over the place throughout Guilty Gear, but he's certainly no stranger to decent enough damage whenever he's top tier. Funnily enough, Yosuke sticks to the definition of Pixie character pretty well, although his health isn't the lowest, yet he's still top tier, unlike the others who often got there by having strong damage or something. Strider mainly saw use as an anchor in Marvel 3 because that's where he could use X Factor to actually do damage, and I'm not even going to comment on Sheik. This archetype is very strong at the top level, where players bring the character as far as humanly possible, but do they cut it when they're played at levels lower than that? You can tell your average Chip player that the character is top tier, but the character might not actually feel that strong for a lot of people playing the character. Especially not when one wrong decision can be all it takes to spell doom. Is this why Pixie characters sometimes break the rules, being given better damage and more health? At least if they're made more forgiving in this way, the average player is more likely to find success with them, rather than dealing with the frustration of feeling like they work hard for less results. Developers do need to balance for everyone after all, not just for the top of the player base. A character may be balanced in the hands of a few top level players, but are they really balanced if the rest of the player base can't find success with them? Maybe it's the fundamental flaw of the archetype. Maybe putting no limits on a character and leaving it up to people's own errors to serve as flaws for said character may just be fundamentally impossible to make feel good at all levels of play. Nevertheless, I've long stepped out of playing fighting games for results and enjoy them best when I'm just there to improve and have fun. Thus, the volatility of the archetype presents little issue for me, because instead of doing first to twos, I just play friends for hours on end. That's where I like Pixies the best. But to each their own, of course. I have a massive respect for the people that main this archetype and run them in tournaments. That seems way too stressful, and I do not wish to partake in such stress. So, thank you Chip for being so cute that you introduced me to this archetype at all. And thank you to Pixie characters overall for enriching my fighting game experience and showing me a whole new level of enjoyment I can have with these games. And finally, thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you got all the way here, I appreciate you so much, so thank you very much for watching. Thank you to everyone who has commented on my past videos, I read them all. Thank you to everyone that subscribed. I'm almost at 1,000, which is nice. But yeah, thank you so much to everyone. You have no idea how much I appreciate it. If you liked this one, please leave a like. If you have any thoughts, leave a comment. And if you enjoyed this content, please subscribe. And, you know, once again, just thank you so much for watching, because I put so much effort into this. Have a wonderful day, and until next time.